Well, good morning. That sound that you hear was the sound we got used to. There was no instruments, sometimes no electricity in some of the churches, and so the voice became the primary instrument of music to God. I want to tell you why I went to Zambia. I went because in January of 1963, when I was 18 years old, I prayed I would meet a man who would love the Lord more than I did. And I did meet him at an intervarsity prayer meeting, and we began to spend time together. In May, that's in 1963, he went for the summer to Word of Life camp in Scroon Lake and shook my hand. He was a very cautious man, and said, "I'll see you in September." Well, I was hoping for more than just a handshake, and about 10 days later, I got a letter from White River, Ontario, as he and his friend were driving across the country and then ultimately to New York. And I don't want to read the whole letter to you. I still have it, 5 pages, but I want to tell you this paragraph. Well, small pages. "We haven't talked much about our relationship to each other, but I do know I enjoy spending time with you. But I'd like to know something. If the Lord called you to the mission field, would you go?" And I can't remember what else the rest of the letter said at this point, but I do remember thinking, I'm going to get my letter in the mail fast. And I wrote back and said, yes, I'll go anywhere the Lord called me. My parents had been prepared to go to Barbados as missionaries and could not because of my father's diabetes. My brother is a lifetime missionary in South America. He's been there over 50 years. So 3 years later, I married that man, and 40 years, 2 years, next in a few weeks, I will have continued to say I'm ready to go. And I was ready to go to Zambia, and I was willing, but I was not prepared for the brokenness. And we've been in many, many kinds of worlds, third worlds, fourth worlds, developing. And so let me show you some of the things. Come with me. If you think of Africa, you might think of the wonderful animals. Oh, before I do, let me show you the map. There it is. Gary's already told you it's surrounded by 5 African nations: Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Angola, the Congo, and Tanzania. And so it's kind of in the center there. But when you think of it, you might think of animals. We saw some. Baboons were all over the place. We were at a park, saw some beautiful animals. I have 500 pictures, so I have to go through these fast. Not this morning. Or you might think of the beautiful scenery, the Zambezi River that rushes to flow in and over the edge to make Victoria Falls. Or you might think of David Livingstone, and Gary has already reflected on him this morning. This is a great picture, or a statue of him. But you would be fascinated, as we were, by the typical Zambian scenes, and they became everyday sights as we lived among the Zambian people. Streets, scenes like this. This is a normal home made of cement. You would see businesses, people walking in the streets. Few people had cars because the roads weren't paved. Potholes were the thing of the day, and you can see how the businesses are right on the street, whether it's somebody sitting or somebody building a little lean-to. The amazing thing to me, and I remember weeping as I took this picture of that little girl. She was probably 10 or 11 years old, carrying her little sister or brother on her back. That was a common scene in Zambia since the average age is 17. It's a country of children because of the crisis of HIV/AIDS. A few Zambians have running water, electricity. There was our first bathroom. The host home that we stayed made it tricky in the middle of the night. For most people who live out in the bush or in the outskirts, they have their own way of making their bathroom, and it's private, but it's pretty primitive. We learned that people don't throw food out. They don't throw paper. Everything was so precious. These were some of the scenes that we had. Without notice, by the way, driving down the street, you could see anthills everywhere. This is one that's been around for a while, with a tree on the top. Ant hills were made from ants' excrement. The Zambians have made use of it by making their homes from the bricks that they take from these ant hills. In fact, they say they make amazingly strong bricks. And so once the ants vacate, then you can move in and use the material. On the border between Zimbabwe and Zambia, you're going to find, as Gary's already said, refugees leaving. I never got over the sight of seeing a Zambian woman and what she had on her head. I mean, most of them had head coverings in church, but this is more than a head covering. And they came and they were walking, crossing, hoping they'd get visas or be accepted into Zambia. And then if you were with us the first night, we settled down in our motel. Here's our motel room, and there's Gary under the mosquito net, and believe it or not, he has a book in his hand. I don't know how he could read it, but we became very, very appreciative of the mosquito net at night. The people that we met, Gary's already described, Gertrude and Kovana Mutenda. They're from Zambia. So our little team was made up of 2 Zambians, 2 Australians, Graham and Keith, Keith and Catherine Graham from Australia. We have met them before in different conferences, so they had been in Bermuda, so we converged on Zambia, and we were the teaching team. The lady in the middle in this piece is the lady that was our hostess for the first week. Her name is Lillian. We lived with the Zambians in such a way that we got to ask a million questions, and Lillian was an amazing hostess, worked hard, made food, and then let us eat in the living room. It was the normal Zambian custom, and sat on the floor with her children in the kitchen. And I tried to get her out of there, but breaking a habit that's a few thousand years old for a Zambian woman is hard. And she became part of our team. The first week, as Gary's mentioned, he taught evangelists from all over. They walked, they rode bikes to get there, and I had a chance to, outside church, just keep moving with these, to teach women. There was another church just across the lot that we walked to, and it didn't have, if you go back to it just for a minute, it had no electricity, so no light, and it had wood, dirt floors, as you can see, and very hard benches. And these women sat through 6 hours of sessions in a day for 5 days, amazing to me, with babies on their backs. And we began to get to know each other. We had cooks who cooked just outside the church where the men were meeting. These are the cooks, and the kitchen is right outside. You'll see it in a minute. Here's the kitchen. And those pots are pots that have charcoal in them, over which chicken and nshima, which is the basic staple food of the Zambian, and chicken. Here's my friend Lillian. Oh, by the way, they go to the market too. Tomatoes, there's lots of good fresh fruit as you go on the market on the highway. And of course, the basic staple is nshima. Tastes a little bit like cornstarch. It's maize, white maize powder, mixed until it gets into a consistency like mashed potatoes. You don't use utensils. You take them, you massage this in your hand. We just did it for 2 days, and then we used utensils. But then you pick up your salad or your vegetable and your chicken, and that's the fare that the men had. Here's the chicken. The next one, they eat everything, claws included. The women then, after this was finished, would set out the food. This is the tent, that orange tent where the men both slept and ate, and then they themselves would take time to eat on the ground in front. So this was a normal day during the time of the seminar. During the meetings, I just need you to see the next one of the man. We stayed with this man the first night, second, third night, I can't remember now, but he didn't tell us he had rooms where chickens were living. And I saw, Gary said, come, take a picture. And so we got there, and he wanted to give me a chicken. Well, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But the next day, the chicken showed up at the church. The girls killed it, plucked it, cooked it, and we ate it. Carrying things is never a challenge in Zambia. That is my computer. I was rolling it along. This lady came and said, please let me take your computer. And I said, no, I carry my own things. And with that, she whipped it up on her head and took off to the meeting. That's amazing to me. This is the group that we actually met that was just outside our church. This is a typical group family grouping. Many children, every family has been hit by the epidemic of HIV/AIDS and is looking after more than their own children. This little group was just outside in the bushes by our church. We would talk to them in there every day, watch them. They're washing, they're cooking. The women were a great group. We would speak. One of my favorite times is the next one where they were so moved by the message, they just got up, and we just had the most great dance worshiping God in terms of their worship and their joy. And there's no instruments here, but there's a lot of good singing. One of the fun times, this is now we've moved up, was Gary had a series of meetings set. I had a series of meetings set. Mine were women. The women always sit on the one side, men on the other. If you go and talk to women, there are no men there. And if you're going to be a man, you're going to have a mixed group, but you're going to have separated. The sexes are going to be separated. Well, we arrived, and there were just women. And, of course, the communication had broken down, so they thought this was going to be a women's meeting. So we sat and waited. Our host wasn't comfortable for me to talk, so we waited. The word got out. The youth joined us. They're the choir, next in the choir, and the men started coming out of somewhere. And so pretty soon the place was full, and we had a good time together. One of the most, the highlights, I think, was for us to come to realize the orphans and the children in Zambia. Oh, let me just go back to that. That's a common tradition. When you leave this morning, you wouldn't just go. You'd stand, and then the next person would stand, and you'd give a 3-hand shake. You'd shake, go up to the thumb, and then down again. When I shake your hand this morning, I'll show you how to do it. And then you'd form a line, and then everybody coming out, so nobody would leave without being greeted. That was a typical thing of every meeting that we had in Zambia. Children in Zambia, the orphans, we came to love them. The first group that's there, the next one is the couple we lived with, the family. We're looking after the twins. These are the little kids that gave me the cold or cough that I had. Not this one, go back. And the boy in the doorway is another relative, 16-year-old orphan. The little kids in the front, their mother was in the back room, probably dying of AIDS. And so we recognized the deep grief and brokenness in this country. The next one, this is Lillian, our hostess's girl that helped her. I tried to learn how to wash clothes like her. I couldn't do it. But the little ones worked into our hearts. And so children are valued. If you look at the next one, this is a toy. The only toys I saw in Zambia, besides a ball, was a tire and this crudely crafted little car that they'd made from wire that they found. We took a trip over dusty roads to the outskirts of town. By the way, this is the big deal in town for little ones. And we knew that children were valued. We took this trip, and you'll see by this road, this is not a nice road to go on. And as we came to the clearing, 200 children just came out into our view, and they were singing. And we could hardly think, being overwhelmed with the emotion of these little ones, who's going to look after them? Now, I know other people have had these experiences before. I hadn't. And so we were moved. We watched the women cook the meal. The children waited for it. And none of them, there it is there, that white stuff, nshima it's called, and the children wouldn't eat it until their hands were washed. And you can imagine, these little kids never had a bath in years. Somebody asked me, how many times a week do they bath? They probably bath once a year, maybe, if they're lucky. So they're waiting for the food. And the lessons I want to leave you that I learned were these. I have another 400 and some. If you want to see them, ask me, I'll show you them. Is that I was willing, but I was not prepared for the brokenness. The second thing is the believer's poverty did not destroy the joy in the Lord Jesus. You cannot kill a relationship with Jesus, no matter how bad your circumstances are. We saw it lived. And then finally, the need is huge, and we can help. And I don't know how, but I do know this. The Word of God says that to whom much is given, much will be required. So I want to be part of that, and I know you do too. Thank you.
again.